You know the suits and the catchphrases and the rules he made up. But almost everything you can quote about Barney Stinson got invented on one bad day when he was still a kid. And the show hides the real reason pretty deep into the series. So today, we are going over the entire story of Barney Stinson, through every moment that built him, and watching one legendary guy's fear of getting hurt turn him into the biggest character on the show. Suit up. When the group meets Barney, he's already decided who he is. He walks up to Ted in a bar in 2001 with the suit, the voice, and the rules, all of it working perfectly, and for a long time that's the only version anybody gets. The show treats him like a machine that says funny things and disappears until the next joke. But How I Met Your Mother spends 9 seasons quietly showing you the factory that built that machine.
On his whirling carousel of suits and cigars and bimbos and booze, round and round it goes, and where's it all?
And the first pieces of it come from a kid on Staten Island who kept asking his mom the same question and kept getting a different answer. Barney grew up with his mom, Loretta, and his older brother, James, and neither of them knew who their dad was. Loretta didn't tell them. What she did instead was make things up, and she was really good at it. When Barney asked about his father, she pointed him toward Bob Barker, the guy who hosted The Price is Right, and Barney believed it well into his 30s. That's not a small lie you tell a 5-year-old so they'll stop bugging you at dinner. That's a story she kept alive for decades while he built his whole idea of himself around it. And Bob Barker wasn't the only one. Loretta had a habit of taking anything that went wrong for her kids and turning it into good news. If Barney lost a game, she found a way to explain that he'd actually won. And if nobody showed up for him, she explained that they were all just jealous. She did it because she was one person doing the job of 2 people. And she wanted her sons to feel like the world was on their side. It worked on him. It also taught him something she never meant to teach him. There's one more piece of his
childhood more clearly than he ever had before.
Childhood he doesn't understand until he's an adult. When Barney was 6, a man he knew as Uncle Jerry took him to the Natural History Museum on July 23, 1981, and Barney managed to knock down the giant blue whale hanging from the ceiling. That's the kind of day a kid remembers forever. Uncle Jerry thought it was hilarious. Then Uncle Jerry stopped showing up because Loretta cut him out of their lives, and Barney spent the next 25 years telling that museum story like it was a fun bit about a family friend who drifted away. Even his first time isn't really his own. Barney is 23 when he finally sleeps with someone, and it only happens because James sets the whole thing up with one of Loretta's friends. So the guy who eventually becomes famous for confidence spent his childhood and most of his 20s as the person other people had to arrange things for. Put all of that together, and you get a kid raised on one very specific lesson. Not that lying is bad, but that a good story works better than a true one. His dad left, so the story became Bob Barker. He lost a game, and somehow he'd won it. A man walked out of his life and got turned into a family friend who just got busy. Barney learned that you can cover almost anything as long as the version you tell is fun enough, and that isn't a party trick. That's the exact skill his entire adult personality runs on, but none of that put him in the suit. That took one specific afternoon in 1998, and the show waits 15 episodes before it lets you anywhere near it.
I was out of college, and I was working at a coffee house with my girlfriend. My girlfriend, Shannon.
By the time Ted meets him, the act is airtight. What almost nobody remembers is that 3 years before that, there was a version of this guy you would have walked straight past. He had long hair down past his shoulders, he worked at a coffee shop, and he was planning to join the Peace Corps. He wasn't sleeping around either. He was waiting until marriage on purpose because he thought that was the right way to do it. Season 1, Episode 15, Game Night, is where the show finally shows you all of this, and it plays like a joke right up until it stops being one. He was going to do the Peace Corps thing with his girlfriend, Shannon. That was the whole plan for his life. Then Shannon showed up at that coffee shop wearing a suit and told him she'd been seeing a guy named Greg, who had the money and the corporate job that Barney very much did not. And she doesn't just leave him, she explains it to him. Greg's money and Greg's world can do more actual good in the world than a kid with a ponytail and a jar of tips ever will, and she'd rather have that. So the thing that breaks Barney isn't really the breakup. It's the person he loved standing in front of him in a suit, telling him that everything he believed in was the exact reason he lost. Not long after, a flyer for a suit store ends up in his hands, and the guy from the coffee shop never comes back. Everything you know about him gets built in the days after that. The suits and the money and the apartment, the refusal to want anything from anybody, the rules about women that he treats like actual law. All of it is copied straight off the man who beat him, because if that's what wins, then Barney is going to be better at it than Greg ever was. And then the show does something with this that you don't see coming for another 8 seasons, because Barney doesn't just build a life that looks like Greg's, he goes and takes a job at Greg's company. Nobody in the group ever finds out what he actually does there, and it becomes a running joke for the entire show. Then in Season 9, Episode 15, Unpause, a very drunk Barney finally explains it. His job is PLEASE, or in other words, provide legal exculpation and sign everything. He's the guy who signs the
Provide legal exculpation and sign everything. Just show up every day, scribble your name in a bunch of documents, and we'll pay you 16 crap loads a year.
paperwork so the company can put the blame on him if anything goes wrong. And at some point along the way, he started handing information to the FBI. Greg gets arrested. So think about what that actually means. Every catchphrase, every suit, every rule, the whole personality people quote and put on t-shirts is a costume he stitched together out of the guy who took his girlfriend. And while he wore it, he was quietly working from inside that man's company until the whole thing came down on him. The suit was never confidence. It was a grudge he put on every single morning for over a decade. By 2001, the costume fits so well that nobody can tell it's a costume. And then he walks into a bathroom at McLaren's, picks a total stranger to be his best friend, and makes the one decision that quietly builds everything else in this show. Nobody asked Barney to be Ted's best friend. He decided it in a bar bathroom, told Ted he was going to teach him how to live, and then just started doing it. That's insane behavior. It's also the reason this show exists, because almost every important thing that happens to this group can be traced back to Barney, deciding he was in charge of it. Start with the biggest one. In the pilot, Ted spots Robin across the bar and does nothing, because Ted is the kind of guy who needs about 40 minutes to work up to saying hi. Barney walks over, drags him along, and hits her with the line he'd already been using for years. Have you met Ted? That's it. That's the entire show.
Have you met Ted?
Hi, have you met Ted?
Hi, I'm Ted.
Yes, me.
The woman Ted spends 9 seasons obsessing over, the woman who ends up in every major decision he makes, only ever talks to him because Barney shoved him at her without asking. It keeps going from there. Early in Season 1, Barney decides Ted is being boring, so he takes him to the airport with no plan and no destination, and they end up in Philadelphia. They get detained, they lick the Liberty Bell. Barney's whole argument is that people have to do ridiculous things sometimes, or they end up with a life nobody would ever tell a story about. And as much as that's obviously an excuse for whatever he already wanted to do, he's also the only person in the group who ever actually drags anyone out of their apartment. He does the same thing to Marshall, just with a job instead of a plane ticket. Barney talks him into an expensive suit, gets him an internship at his own company, then coaches him on how to act like everybody else in that office so he can survive it. Later, he helps get both Marshall and Ted work connected to Goliath National Bank, which is how Ted ends up designing the building that becomes the biggest thing in his career. Barney does not get credit for any of that from anyone ever. And then there's the one he actively hides. When Lily leaves Marshall and moves to San Francisco, Marshall falls apart. Barney makes fun of him about it constantly. What Marshall doesn't know until his bachelor party in Season 2 is that Barney got on a plane, flew across the country, found Lily, bought her a ticket back to New York, and told her Marshall was the best man he knew and that somebody else would figure that out if she didn't come home. Marshall finds this out and immediately makes Barney a co-best man with Ted. He officiates their wedding too, since it turns out he's legally allowed to. He goes on The Price is Right, believing Bob Barker is his father, wins a pile of prizes, and hands all of it over to Marshall and Lily as a wedding gift without ever telling Barker what he thinks. He also loses the slap bet to Marshall over a theory about Robin that turns out to be completely wrong, and takes those slaps across the next 7 years.
Barney gets 3 slaps.
3?
1 because you lied, and 2 for being prematurely slapped.
That's the pattern the whole character runs on. He performs selfishness, constantly, loudly, in a way that makes him look like the worst person in any room, and then the show keeps catching him doing the opposite when nobody's watching. He built an identity around not needing anyone, and the second one of these 4 people needs something. He's already on a plane about it. So he's the guy holding this group together, which makes it so much worse when he becomes the one person who almost blows the whole thing apart. And the ugliest part is that the show plants it 2 full seasons before it happens. Barney's story stops being about women in general the second it becomes about one specific woman, and he fights that harder than he's ever fought anything. Because the rules only work if none of them matter to him. The moment one of them does, the whole system he built after Shannon stops protecting him. The first crack shows up way earlier than people remember. Season 1. Episode 14, Zip Zip Zip, is the night Barney and Robin figure out they're the same person.
Yeah, me too. The trick is to bend the aircraft carrier so it makes an L.
I always just stack the ships on top of each other.
They smoke cigars, they play laser tag, she cheats at Battleship. And he sits there realizing he's found the only other adult in New York who thinks all of this is a good time. He starts making his move on her, gets pretty far into it, and then stops. Not because of the bro code, because he can tell she has feelings for Ted, and he backs off. 2 seasons later, he doesn't. In Season 3, Episode 16, Sandcastles in the Sand, Robin gets rejected by an old boyfriend, and Barney is the one who's there for it. They end up watching her old music video together, She's a Wreck, and they sleep together. And the way the show frames it, this isn't a conquest for him. It's the first time he's been in a room with someone who's actually sad and chosen to stay. Then Robin tells Ted. Ted ends the friendship on the spot. And he's right too, because Barney spent years writing rules about exactly this and forcing Ted to follow them. The bro code is his invention. He treats it like the Constitution. And the first time it costs him something he wants, he ignores it completely, which tells you everything about how much those rules were ever really about honor. What he does next is the part people underrate. In Season 3, Episode 20, Miracles, Barney hears that Ted's been in a car accident while he's sitting in a business meeting. He walks out of it, doesn't wait for a cab, and starts running toward the hospital. He gets hit by a bus on the way, he still gets there. Ted forgives him in a hospital room where they're both wrecked and tells him they're not just friends, they're brothers. That's the price Barney was willing to pay to get one person back.
Barney, come on, we're more than friends. We're brothers.
Season 4 is where he stops pretending. Robin and Ted start sleeping together to avoid arguing about their apartment, and Barney comes apart in a way that's genuinely hard to watch. He gets mean. He gets destructive. Lily takes one look at it and tells him exactly what's wrong with him, because Lily is the only one who ever reads him correctly. He builds Robin a video resume to help her land a job so her visa doesn't force her out of the country, which he never mentions to anybody as a favor. And by the end of that season, the two of them finally stop lying about it and kiss. Then they date, and it's terrible. Season 5 shows them turning into people neither of them likes. Barney is secretly taking lessons from Ted on how to be a boyfriend, which is both hilarious and kind of sad because he genuinely does not know how. They gain weight, they get lazy, they stop being the 2 most dangerous people in any bar. So they end it, agree they were happier as friends, and Barney goes straight back to the playbook and starts running schemes again, like the last 2 years never happened. That's the loop. He gets close to something real, it breaks, and he retreats into the guy he invented in 1998 because that guy can't get hurt. He broke his own rules for Robin, nearly lost his best friend, got hit by a literal bus fixing it, finally got hurt, and then ran right back to the costume the second it got hard. But the playbook is a hiding place, not an ending, because 2 very different women are about to walk into his life and offer him the exact thing he keeps swearing he doesn't want. And so is somebody he'd stopped looking for a long time ago. Season 6 is where the show stops letting him joke his way out. It puts the 2 things he's spent his whole life avoiding right in front of him at the same time, which are his father and the possibility that he might actually want a normal life. It starts with a letter. Barney and James go digging through Loretta's house and find an unsent letter to a man named Sam Gibbs, with a childhood photo and a line about his son. They track him down. And it turns out Sam is James's father, not Barney's. So James gets an answer and Barney gets nothing. Loretta offers to tell him who his dad is right there, and Barney says no. He tells his mom that she was both parents for him and that she doesn't owe him anything else, which is probably the kindest thing he does in the entire series.
I already have a father.
It doesn't hold. When Marshall's dad dies later that season, Barney watches his friend lose something he never had in the first place, and he changes his mind. He makes the call. His father's name is Jerome Whitaker, and Barney already knows him because Jerome is Uncle Jerry from the museum. Season 6, Episode 19, Legend Daddy, is where he meets him, and it goes wrong in a way Barney is not prepared for. He expects a cool guy because his memory of Uncle Jerry is a guy who let a 6-year-old knock over a whale and laughed about it. What he gets is a quiet suburban dad with a wife, a house, and a younger son named JGJ, who got everything Barney didn't. Homework help, a driveway, a dad who was there on a Tuesday. Barney doesn't yell about the childhood he missed. He walks outside and rips the basketball hoop off the garage because that hoop is every ordinary afternoon he never got, and he wants it back. So he's carrying that, and right in the middle of it, he meets Nora. She's a friend of Robin's. She's normal, she wants a real relationship, and Barney is clearly interested. He also refuses to admit it out loud, tells her the opposite, and loses his shot. When he finally works out that he does want this, he goes back and does the one thing that never occurs to him, which is telling her the ugly truth about his past and letting her decide. She decides yes, it works. They're actually together. And then he sleeps with Robin. Both of them are with other people at the time, and afterward, Barney tells Nora the truth about what he did because he promised her honesty, and he keeps that promise at the exact moment it destroys him. She ends it. Robin doesn't leave her boyfriend, so Barney gets nothing, having done the one mature thing he's ever done.
I cheated on you.
I don't even know how to react.
Quinn is next, and she's the closest thing he ever meets to himself. She works at a club, and she's running a con on him before they even properly meet, taking him for everything she can get. He figures it out. And instead of being angry, he's impressed, and they end up together for real. They move in, he proposes to her at an airport, then they sit down to write a prenup, and it turns into a war. Because he doesn't trust her, and she doesn't trust him, and both of them know exactly what the other one is capable of. They call it off. Not because they don't love each other, but because they both know love isn't the thing that was missing. Line all three up, and it's the same story every time. Nora, Quinn, and Robin before them. He gets right to the edge of the thing he actually wants, and the price of walking through the door is being honest and unprotected in front of another person, and he can't do it. Not because he doesn't feel anything, because the entire personality he built in 1998 is a machine designed to make sure nobody can ever leave him the way Shannon did, and that machine does not have an off switch. So that's 3 chances gone with the same problem sitting underneath all of them, which means everything up to here is basically a warning label on what he does next. Because he's about to get married anyway, and the show hands him an entire final season built around that wedding. What it does to him after the wedding is the thing people are still arguing about more than 10 years later. The last stretch of Barney's story is either the biggest reset in the show or the only ending that was ever going to fit him. And where you land on that depends entirely on what you think this character was actually about. It starts with a stranger at a drugstore in 2012. Barney is running a challenge, it falls apart completely, and the woman he tried it on sits down outside with him afterward and pushes him on it. She wants to know what he actually wants underneath all the games. That woman is Tracy, years before she meets Ted, and she has no idea who she's talking to. But the question lands, and it feeds directly into what he does next. What he does next is the most Barney thing possible. He breaks up Robin and her boyfriend by telling her he loves her, then starts dating her coworker, Patrice, then stages a public proposal to Patrice that makes Robin lose her mind. She races to a rooftop to stop it, and Season 8, Episode 12, the final page, reveals that all of it was fake. Patrice, the breakup, the proposal, the weeks of misery, all of it was a play out of the playbook that he wrote entitled The Robin, built for the sole purpose of getting her onto that roof. He shows her the pages, he tells her every single thing he lied about, and then he asks her to marry him, and she says yes anyway. The wedding weekend takes up most of Season 9, and the show spends it stress testing him. James, his brother, the one person who proved a Stinson could stay married, shows up with his own marriage falling apart. Robin panics and nearly runs, and when Barney finally gets her alone, the thing he offers her isn't a grand speech about love. He promises he'll never lie to her again. Out of everything he could have said, he picks the one thing he's never managed to give anybody.
From this day forward, I am always going to be honest with you.
They get married in May of 2013. Then the finale hits fast forward. Robin's career takes off, and the job means she's constantly in another country. And Barney goes with her for a while and hates it, and they're both worn down and unhappy in a way that doesn't have a villain in it. No cheating, no playbook, They just don't work as a life. They divorce in 2016, 3 years in, and he goes right back. The suits, the schemes, the same guy from 1998, and in 2019 he attempts something called the perfect month, which is a different woman every single night for 31 nights in a row. This is the part that made a huge chunk of the audience close their laptops because it looks like the show took 5 seasons of growth and hit undo on all of it. The last woman of that month, known only as number 31, gets pregnant. Barney has a daughter. Her name is Ellie. And there's a scene right before this where he insists he could never be the kind of man who meets somebody and instantly hands them his entire life, that it isn't in him and it never was. Then he's standing in a hospital holding a baby who is a few hours old, and he says it without a second of hesitation. "You are the love of my life. Everything I have and everything I am is yours forever." Fans have been fighting about this ever since, and both sides have a real case. One side says the divorce and the relapse threw away everything the show built, that you don't spend an entire season on a wedding and then undo it in 20 minutes. The other side says Robin was never the thing that was going to change him, that the show set up that exact sentence just so it could be paid off by a baby instead of a bride, and that a man who grew up with a father who left was always going to find his ending in a delivery room. But strip the argument away and you're left with one image. A guy who spent 20 years building a personality specifically so that nobody could ever take anything from him again, standing in a hospital room, handing everything he has to somebody who is 10 minutes old and can't even understand him yet, and meaning every word of it for the first time in his life.
I have, and everything I am is yours forever.
If you liked this one and want more deep dives into the entire crew, subscribe and check out the video on screen now.